Hey everyone, it's been over 2 minutes and... Okay, I didn't get raped, but I wanted to use that clip in my last video, so there you go. Stop playing break free from your chains, to break free from your cage. What we don't want to do is go back to a traditionalist world. Hi, I'm Diana Davison. A little while ago, and I'll link to this below, I did a video that talked about why men's rights are not human rights. And it discussed the difference between civil rights and human rights. Now, human rights are the tool of social justice warriors, or social justice theory, and it is mostly successful because of what I'm going to call Hitler's ghost. In the same article that I was talking about before, which comes from Spiked Online, which is a great site, and you should check it out if you care about free speech. There was another part to the article that I didn't really talk about as much, or that I want to go into more detail about now. That is how the ghost of Hitler, the events of the Second World War, were the impetus pressing human rights codes being passed at the UN level and being adopted by countries. In Canada, the adoption of the Human Rights Charter was followed 2 days later by the formation of the Women's Legal Education and Action Fund, which is specifically driven by enhancing or evolving the way human rights will change what equality means in the court systems. So that's a whole bunch of stuff to think about. I just want to focus right now on the ghost of Hitler. And here's the bit of the article from Spiked that I want to talk about to start with. The human rights discourse is premised on the need to protect man from himself. Unsurprisingly, the Second World War provided an impetus for human rights arguments. Some 150 years after Paine's Rights of Man, H.G. Wells published his own Rights of Man in 1940. But his book is no celebration of human rationality. He promoted human rights after being stirred profoundly by those outrages upon human dignity by the Nazis. Now, after the Second World War, we all wanted to learn the lessons of Hitler and the Jewish concentration camps, and we didn't just focus on trying to learn the lessons from this. Hitler's ghost became elevated to essentially a religious figure for those secular people in the audience. Hitler essentially replaced Satan. He is the face of evil, and actually he's more effective than the character of Satan because it has a tangible face. It's something that we can actually be afraid of in the real world. And this is the value of keeping the ghost of Hitler alive. It is being used for many nefarious purposes in the courts of law. Now, everyone knows that Hitler is well and alive on the internet. We have Godwin's law.
Godwin's law states that as an online discussion grows longer, the probability of a comparison involving Nazis or Hitler approaches 1.
Right now, the concept of evil has been given many names and faces, and feminists like to refer to it as the patriarchy. And it doesn't really work as effectively as Hitler because the patriarchy is kind of a nameless, faceless entity, just like the religious Satan. You know, it's out there, but, you know, I can't really point at someone and say, that's who it is. It's all men, essentially, and this is part of the battle that men are facing in the social justice climate. So, I came across another article which is actually just addressing social justice theory and calling into question the practical side of whether or not social justice theory is something that society can benefit from. One of the problems in facing social justice warriors is that it becomes a political battle, and then it's just talking about which is better, the left or the right. And I think that overall, with the given apathy of people in the voting polls, that having a discussion about left or right isn't really going to solve some of the bigger issues here because they're both pretty much the same thing. And in fact, both the left and the right support human rights and think that these are important to have encoded into our legal systems. So anyways, just a brief look at this article that talks about the practical side of social justice theory. What social justice theory is really about is equality. But that just begs the following question. What precisely is so bad about unequal outcomes? I shall now argue that social justice advocates have an answer to this, but they don't know what it really is and therefore cannot understand why it is wrong. Social justice advocates view inequality of outcomes as sufficient evidence of injustice because they have a very narrow and foolish vision of equality that we all naturally find plausible because of our small group moral sensibilities and our hardwired proclivity to be envious. In short, social justice theory implicitly focuses on the equal division of output without accounting for input. He goes on to say, social justice theory therefore effectively considers only half of the relevant story when making judgments about what is fair and therefore just across the whole of any society. But surely I must be missing something. Otherwise, how could social justice theory be so popular? I submit that it is so popular because, in reality, all that social justice theory does is codify small group moral sensibilities that come naturally to us by virtue of being a small group species. All right, so he's talking about how humans are used to living in small groups. And within a small group, you can actually figure out if somebody's shirking and therefore not earning their part of the output. And you can see this actually in office groups, let's say, where you're given an assignment or a task to complete and there's a team of people put together. If one of the people in the team isn't pulling their weight, then it's quite easily seen, and the people involved in that small group can then try to remedy the situation. But once you expand into a larger picture of society, we're all just numbers living in little boxes, and we can't tell when we pay our taxes which of the people who get part of that benefit of what the taxes are going to pay for if everybody's doing their part to contribute to the booty, right? So it's an interesting article that covers some of the economic aspects of what's wrong with social justice theory and why it has its flaws that have to be dealt with. And, you know, like I said earlier, this is just ends up devolving into left versus right or libertarian and blah, 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 blah. But he says in there that he has a theory about why it happens, and really social justice didn't really get that far until Hitler came along and gave everybody something to be afraid of. And as the original Spiked article points out, the advancement of these laws were based on fear. People get a hero reward out of the idea that they're out there fighting evil and being good moral people. And Hitler plays a very important role in giving people something to look for and something to fight, something to watch for. And this kind of mentality, this negative expectation of humanity is going to result in vigilante justice and social justice warriors who no longer have a rational perspective on how the justice system should be used. All right, so what's the threat of Hitler's ghost? And this constant reminder of Hitler. Hitler's out there. Oh, you sound just like Hitler on the internet. You know, if you spend any time on the internet, you know that Hitler's alive and well. He's living on the internet and ready to pop out of it at any moment. You know, unless we get out there with our keyboards and fight him like mad. So the danger of this way of thinking is that people will sacrifice their civil liberties in order to fight the ghost of Hitler. It's one of the, I think, more and more studied aspects of culture, the shock doctrine and the use of fear. And in fact, Hitler himself employed fear in his propaganda in order to accomplish his goals. A little bit of irony there. So this fear-based culture and the promotion of fear is something to be very wary of. And in the men's rights community, they've got this term feminazis. They refer to feminists as, you know, similar to the Nazis and stuff. And there may be very good reasons for that comparison. But ultimately, when you bring up Hitler, what you do is you remind people that the great Satan is out there and that we all have to be very careful and give up civil liberties in order to make sure that Hitler doesn't pop out of the internet someday and wipe out another 50 million people. So again, from the Spiked Online article, the essence of these human rights claims is an assertion that the claimant has a legal right to something from the state. Whether each claim is meritorious is neither here nor there. What matters is that the claim is made on the basis of there being a human right to it. This human rights discourse is of recent vintage and gained currency during and after the Second World War with the publication of Hirsch Lauterpacht's influential book, An International Bill of the Rights of Man, 1945, the adoption by the United Nations of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, and the drafting of the European Convention on Human Rights, 1950. Although the human rights discourse was in abeyance for several decades after the Second World War, it has come to the fore of legal and political thinking in recent years. In 1998, the UK Human Rights Act was passed by the Labour government with cross-party support. Even now, for all the gnashing of teeth by the Conservatives over decisions of the European Court of Human Rights, the Conservatives remain committed to the human rights discourse. It's just that they prefer the British to the European version. So the question is, do you think that we should base our society on the idea that people are rational, or do you think that we should make laws based on the idea that we're all just a bunch of little Hitlers running around looking for our chance to take over the world? How do we craft our legal system? Based on a faith in mankind, or based on the ghost of Hitler?
Looks like he's turning around to someone saying, look, I'm ready, are you? You've been hours getting dressed, let's just go out. Doesn't look that.
Well, listen, say what you like about him, great socks.
Yeah.
And now for the rape joke of the week. You know, maybe I shouldn't do these rape jokes anymore because they just always sound so forced.